So let me ask this directly, Mr. President. Today, on the 3rd of February, does Rwanda currently have any troops at all in Eastern DRC?
I don't know.
You're the commander-in-chief.
Yeah, there are many things I don't know.
What we need to do is just to implement what we signed. And what we signed is very clear. It has obligations for each side. And the security obligations we have is to neutralize the FDLR, which will allow for the lifting of Rwanda's defensive measures. So this is something that we should be doing. So the Congolese side cannot say that talk about Rwandan troops or anything about Rwanda without talking about its part of the deal, which is to neutralize the FDLR that are supported by the DRC government, that are embedded in the DRC army. And this is something that they should be doing before talking about anything else.
Is Rwanda going to cease supporting M23 rebels?
Rwanda doesn't support the M23. Rwanda doesn't support the M23. Rwanda doesn't support the M23. The M23 is negotiating with the DRC government in Doha to find a solution to the problem they have. They have actually on 15th of December signed a framework agreement which will settle the problem they have, addressing the root causes, which include the marginalization and persecution of the Congolese Tutsi, the Congolese of Rwandan culture and language. So this is a separate issue that is being dealt with in Doha.
The UN says that the Rwandan army is in de facto control of M23 operations, including training their recruits under the supervision of Rwandan forces and supporting the rebels with high-tech Rwandan weaponry. Do you deny that?
This is what they say. They should actually focus on the support that the FDLR is getting from the DRC government. This is the main issue.
But do you deny this report by the UN?
We already denied it, madam.
President Trump says that everybody is going to make a lot of money. What is in it for Rwanda?
Oh, it's an important agreement. The Regional Economic Integration Framework that we signed today provide economic opportunities for both DRC and Rwanda, also with the support of the US, because we have now agreed to make joint investment in energy, for example, hydraulic project, the methane gas that we have in the Lake Kivu, which is between Rwanda and DRC, to co-manage the national parks we have in common, and also to work on a critical minerals value chain between Rwanda and DRC. So those are plenty of opportunities, not to mention infrastructure. This will open a new chapter of a positive narrative or of cooperation between Rwanda and DRC.
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're watching from. Glad to be back. It's another Saturday, another day for us to talk about the Congo. So welcome to Go Unfiltered, and we really don't recycle point or talking points. We just don't repeat them, whether they are from the Rwandan government or the Congolese government. We speak the truth. We speak truth to power. And today's episode is going to be critical, and I'm going to have two guests today, and one that we already know. He's an habitué, he's always here, Claude Gatebuke, and also another one that we're gonna have, Niels Kinwani, that will also join us, because really for the first time in a long time, three things are happening at the same time and together. So they expose a deeper truth about the Congo. So first we have the Congolese lawyer, and not politicians. We have the civil society Congolese lawyers. They're not part of any armed groups. They're decided to take the Washington Accord to court in Kinshasa, the Supreme Court. And the second, we have the US Congress that held a hearing last week on Thursday, claiming to advance peace in the Great Lake regions. So they were having that hearing while repeating dangerous, I would say, falsehood about the Congo. And we are going to dissect that in this episode as well. And then third, and that's why I wanted to have our fellow brother from Rwanda, Claude Gatebuke. We have Rwanda's own government that made, for the very first time in a decade since M23 exists, they have made an admission that essentially collapsed years of denial. So the question today is very simple, and we're gonna ask that question in a way that is important for folks to understand. And we already have folks writing and grading Mr. David, who's messaging us from X. So the question here is simple. We're gonna try to define some terms, some concept, but also we're gonna ask the question of who defines peace for the Congo? Who defines even justice from Rwandan people? Is it Congolese law? Is it Paul Kagame or foreign interest? Right. So let's start with the law real quick. In terms of what's happening in Kinshasa, like I mentioned at the beginning, there were Congolese lawyers that decide to take the case, the Washington court to the Supreme Court, the Congolese Constitutional Court. And why they decided to essentially do that? It's because on June 27th, President Tshisekedi signed through his Minister of Foreign Affairs what is being called the Washington Accord. And that was done in the United States, in Washington, D.C. They even were at the Oval Office, and we covered that live. And for those who have been watching us from the beginning, and it was presented as a strategic partnership. That deal, that Washington Accord, was presented as a strategic partnership for peace, for minerals, and for the infrastructure. But here's a problem, that the Congolese people here, right, never saw it, never read it, never voted on it. The parliament, the Congolese parliament, never saw that either. They never approved it. So, according to the constitutional petition that was filed in Kinshasa, the agreement was negotiated and signed without transparency, without parliamentary scrutiny, and also without public consent. I do not think that the folks in Bandalungwa, in Matete, if I just stay in Kinshasa, the capital, in Jili, in Matonge, people don't know what was going on. They did not know what was happening until it happened. And that really matters, because sovereignty really doesn't disappear through invasion anymore. It disappears through procedures. And I believe that was also signed, that accord was signed when the member of parliaments were on vacations, because you usually have, I think they're supposed to, they start in September. So they were literally on vacation. Even when the strategic partnership was signed in December, they were still on vacation until, I think, March. That's when they're supposed to resume. So let's try to kind of like introduce the legal action that was taken. Let me see if we have the images there. In terms of what's going on, but anyways, so earlier this month, a collective of lawyers decided to essentially, the collective of lawyers and human rights defenders decided to file a formal petition before the Constitutional Court at the DRC. And I think it's really important for me to show the imagery so y'all can actually see what I'm talking about. Let's see. Give me a second. Yes, okay. Yes, okay, there you go. And so who are these people that decided to, kind of like confront the Tshisekedi's regime or government, because they think that what has been happening, that the things that were done in Washington, D.C. was simply not constitutional. So it's a group of collective attorneys, lawyers, I will say, and also members of the civil society. So we have the Collective of Lawyers and Human Rights Defenders. You have the ANVC, the National Association of Victims of the Congo, and you have the FIFA-DH, which is the Girl and Woman in Action Human Rights. And then the fourth are just individual citizen, Mr. Kalonji, Jean-Marie Kalonji, and Mr. Mboto, that essentially were like, you know what? We are going to put in use what we have learned by just reading it, from our skill, our expertise to go to school and to exercise this profession. We are going to go and use legal procedures to tackle this. So they filed a formal petition before the Constitutional Court of the DRC, and that was not an act of activism at all. This is constitutional law, that we are actually talking legal terms. We are actually talking the law and how they want the court to declare the agreement unconstitutional and null, essentially, with absolutely no legal effect for the Congolese state. They do not want that. They don't want any suspension. They don't want things to be renegotiated quietly. They just want the accord, the Washington Accord, nulled and void, essentially. So, and for those who are actually following us on Instagram, we did publish kind of like a breakdown, and that's what I'm showing, a breakdown of what's going on, what's happening in terms of that court, that case, the case that the Congolese folks, that the civil society decided to bring forward to the Constitutional Court. So you see, so we have the very first argument is essentially the violation of Article 214, right? And that itself is the first pillar of the petition. Is the Article 214 of the Constitution, of the Congolese Constitution. And that article is very clear. And it says, and I quote, that any treaty involving peace, commerce, public finances, legislative changes, and territory must be approved by law, and in some cases by referendum, right? So that petition argues that the agreement clearly touches all of those domains. And yet there was no parliamentary ratification, that, like I mentioned at the beginning introduction, that the Congolese parliament was bypassed, was ignored. There was no public debate, no referendum at all. And the petition anticipates that the government's defense, that is not really a treaty, but a partnership framework. And the response is simple here, right? That you don't escape obligation, constitutional obligation, by just changing the label, right? In constitutional law, and hopefully we will get Mr. Jean-Marie to kind of like provide like an analysis of what's going on and have it interpreted for you guys. But I'm just speaking from what I've learned by reading the petition, and also the internal conversation we had among ourselves within France of the Congo, that in constitutional law, that the effects here matters more than the titles, right? So the second violation here is the violation of the Article 217. And next is that the Constitution right there allows a partial alienation, and that's allowed, of the sovereignty only to promote African unity, right? And the agreement is with a non-African power. It is with the United States of America, the almighty United States, right? We all agree that the US is not in the continent of Africa. So therefore, we cannot violate, the president of the Congo cannot violate Article 217, because this accord is not promoting African unity at all. So the petition argues that granting foreign decisions, right, making power over Congo's strategic sectors crosses the constitutional red line. So in other words, even partial sovereignty transfer is illegal here. And that also goes hand in hand with the Article 9 of the Constitution, of the Congolese Constitution, that talks about the permanent sovereignty over resources. That the Article 9 establishes that Congo's permanent sovereignty over its soil, subsoil, and natural resources. But yet what we've seen is that the Accord creates some sort of like a joint commissions where decisions and mining projects, exports, and corridors are taken by consensus. And I think that's what I was trying to say. And for those watching us even on X, we published a thread also explaining that how the Accord is creating like a joint commissions with obviously Congolese parties, but also American party as well, members. So you have U.S. citizen, you have Congolese citizen, and the decisions are being made in consensus, which means that let's say that the U.S. does not agree with something, right? And if one member says no, there is no decision moving forward. No decision moving forward. So the United States, in some sense, has a veto power in internal Congolese affairs, in affairs that strictly are about Congolese minerals, right? So it is a foreign affairs, foreign veto, I would say, that even if it's dressed up as cooperation, it is still wrong. It is still illegal. And I really want to be clear about something, right? That we are not whatsoever trying to be anti-American here, right? We are only talking from the lens of Congolese law. Like, are the Congolese people even included into that? And that's why the civil society decided to take that accord to the Supreme Court. Obviously, we know there is corruption. We know what's going on. But at the end of the day, just like folks here in the US says that nobody's above the law, and if we do believe in the rules of law here, that same logic should be applied elsewhere, that we cannot promote, we cannot allow laws to be transgressed, to be violated overseas. We cannot allow international law to just be trashed, right? So if this accord stands, it will set a precedent where Congo's sovereignty becomes conditional. And that is a flagrant violation of international law also that talks about that sovereignty of nations, that accord being negotiated behind closed door and enforced through procedures are simply illegal, unconstitutional. So when Congo here has lived this movie before, from Leopold II, where the people were ignored, they had Leopold II facilitate the Congo with the millions of Congolese that were there, giving him an entire land and people as his personal property to have facilitate the plunder of the Congo, to allow the West to continue to get all those minerals for the automobile industry. The Congolese people were not even associated to that. They didn't even know that there was somebody called Leopold II that were ruling over them. Out of nowhere, they're forced to carve rubber and other minerals and have their hands cut because they were not meeting the quota. Same thing with Mobutu. When Mobutu was imposed after the assassination of Lumumba, the people were imposed Mobutu for 32 years to even structural adjustment from the IMF, who they have someone within the central bank of the Congo. And I remember Brother Kambale talk about it, and he even shared on his Instagram page regarding that, how the Congolese central bank was governed, was led by an American, I believe, from the IMF, right? So where all the law, the the things regarding the economy of the country, how the Congo should take care of its loan, were decided really on paper, unofficially, I would say, by people that were not even Congolese in the first place, to the proxy wars that we see and we talk about the M23 today. So peace here is always being promised to the Congolese people. And sovereignty, unfortunately, has always been postponed as well. And we've seen that. So now, while the Congolese lawyers are defending the constitution in Congo and Kinshasa, something else was happening this week. And I'm going to bring, not sure if Brother Claude is up, maybe not. Is Claude here? No, Claude is not there. Okay, he's probably going to join us. But something else was happening, and this time it was in Washington, D.C., that the U.S. congressional hearing, they met. And it's very fascinating, even when you look at the title of what that hearing was about. And let me see if I can share that with y'all. Not that one. This one. And it says, advancing peace in DRC and Rwanda through President Trump's Washington Accord. That title is very interesting because it tells you a lot, right? That the peace in the DRC, or the peace between DRC and Rwanda, but I'm just going to say the peace in DRC because Congolese people are being killed, they're being slaughtered, they're being displaced. It is the Congolese children that are being forced into mine. It is the Congolese women that are being raped. So I'm going to say peace in DRC. And that peace is through an accord that the Congolese people did not approve. It says through President Trump's Washington Accord. And obviously, we were actually laughing in the background that is probably Trump that reviewed the title and said, hey, I want my name to be up there, right? Because that's what we kind of see now. But seriously, though, like when you think about this, that what's missing, and that's what the Congolese collective of attorneys and human rights activists are saying, that the Congolese civil society voices was missing. That no constitutional lawyers from the Congo were even included. That what's the ramification of having this accord in the Congo when you have a constitution? What are the ramifications of essentially canceling or ignoring the Congolese constitution? That the victims of war are not being discussed in that room, right? That Congo, again, and I will show some clips here, was framed as a problem to be managed, not a people with rights, not human beings with rights. That the Congo was framed, or was framing that hearing as a land, a terrain critical for the U.S. supply chain. For how can the U.S. get the minerals out of the Congo and bring them to America? Forgetting about the Congolese right to even know what's going on with the lands, with the resources. And that's the problem. And when a U.S. congressman says that Eastern Congo used to be Rwanda, that was not a mistake. Don't know if I have that video there. But I think Claude is here, so I'm gonna bring Claude on stage. So, yo, Claude, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
I'm excited to be here with you and Niels.
Yes, and thank you so much for it. And I know it was last minute. I apologize that I'm saying this, but you always like willing to just jump in and then just provide our your insight as as an activist yourself, as a human rights activist, and also as a Rwandan citizen, to kind of like help us understand what is going through the mind of the Rwandan government. But I'm gonna, get into that because it's very interesting. Some of the few clips that I think it's worth actually playing regarding that. But I wanted to first play. Do I have it here? I wanted to play the. Let's see. Give me a second. First, while I'm looking for that, so did you watch the hearing? Like, what did you think about what was being said about the Rwandan government, even posture? And I know we're gonna talk about it in the third part, but I wanted to have first an impression of the Washington Accord and how it was signed and how that was discussed in that briefing and how even the Rwandan people. I say the Congolese people, but even the Rwandan people, they're not being asked what's going on because you have a dictator, Paul Kagame, that has been there since early 2000s, and it seems that the Rwandan people are not being asked what they want. So I really want to have your kind of like, understanding of what's the situation is going on and why both Congolese citizens and Rwandan citizens, the people, are being ignored.
Gaetan, I think, it wouldn't be a show if we don't have a little bit of a disagreement, but Kagame's been in charge not since the early 2000s. He had a puppet in 1994 after his coup that came through the Rwandan genocide. Then that he was basically ruling through that puppet, one of his Hutu puppets, Pastor Bizimungu. Then in 2000, he officially then did a real coup against his own puppet. So Rwanda's been under Kagame's dictatorship since 1994. So for the last 32 years. But as far as the hearing and the Washington Accord in general, the accord, as you said, does not take into account the Congolese people's wishes and voices, and doesn't even really there's no accountability. I mean, I know that during the signing in December, Trump did mention accountability, but when you read it, there's nothing in there that is addressing the need for accountability, the crimes that's been committed, the invasion, occupation, pillaging, and rape of the Congolese people, territory, and resources. So it's the same song, a different verse today. In this hearing, the people's voices. If you're asking about Rwanda's people's voices, the people's voices are not represented. The people's voices are not even heard. I think it's one of the kind of thing that's always forgotten about Rwanda, or people leave out of the narrative when they talk about Rwanda has 60% or whatever the percentage is now of women in parliament. In Rwanda, what Kagame does is use those women as his puppets to rubber stamp whatever he is, not just Kagame, the military, the regime. They use it for them to rubber stamp whatever is decided by the military regime in power. And so in turn, Rwanda's parliament doesn't even have these type of discussions. They don't talk about these deals. This is just happening by, through the regime itself. It's also they're not elected officials. So we can't call them representatives of the people. So in Rwanda, a lot of people would like to see this war ended for a number of reasons. Not war, just the genocide in the Congo. And I know that there's a lot of censorship on all these platforms. So let me know if I need to modify my language here with all of the social media censorship on some of these things, naming a genocide.
That's Congo filter, so speak freely.
But the genocide taking place in the Congo, the pillaging, rape, and occupation that's taking place in the Congo it has a cost on Rwandan people, especially people who have young men and women in their families who are being forcibly, many who are being forcibly recruited, conscripted into Rwanda's military to go and invade the Congo. And a lot of them, thousands of them, have gone back in body bags. They have been killed on battle. When in the takeover of Goma, there were thousands of Rwandan troops that were killed. Again, for me, if somebody is forced to go into it, that's a victim. If somebody volunteers to go into it, then they made that choice. At the end of the day, though, there are a lot of families that are crying. They can't even hold funerals for their own children. When the bodies come back in those body bags, they actually give a family a casket and say the body is in there. They don't even get to see the body. So they don't have closure. It's traumatizing. Young people are afraid that they will be recruited to go and fight into the Congo. And Rwandan people are not benefiting from anything that is happening in the Congo. It's the regime, it's Paul Kagame and his cronies and his surroundings, the Rwanda military, and members of the ruling class, the Rwandan elite, which are mostly, almost exclusively Tutsi, with a pinch here and there of their Hutu puppets like Olivier Nduhungirehe and a bunch of other, a few others in like the prime minister. They usually have a Hutu puppet as a prime minister ever since Kagame became the president, and a number of others who are basically they're serving the regime. For sure, the things that they say they don't even believe. I mean, I saw the clips of Olivier Nduhungirehe.
Let me play that again. Let me play that again. Let me play this again for folks to understand what we have been living with. Because again, and that's on the other portion. The Rwanda government's admitted of supporting the M23, but watch what they were saying.
Yeah,
not long
that's
ago.
That's one of Kagame's most committed Hutu puppets. So let's see what he's saying.
Yes.
So let me ask this directly, Mr. President. Today, on the 3rd of February, does Rwanda currently have any troops at all in Eastern DRC?
I don't know.
You're the commander-in-chief.
Yeah, there are many things I don't know.
What we need to do is just to implement what we signed. And what we signed is very clear. It has obligations for each side. And the security obligations we have is to neutralize the FDLR, which will allow for the lifting of Rwanda's defensive measures. So this is something that we should be doing. So the Congolese side cannot just say that, talk about Rwandan troops or anything about Rwanda without talking about its part of the deal, which is to neutralize the FDLR that are supported by the DRC government, that are embedded in the DRC army. And this is something that they should be doing before talking about anything else.
Is Rwanda going to cease supporting M23 rebels?
Rwanda doesn't support the M23. Rwanda doesn't support the M23. Rwanda doesn't support the M23. The M23 is...
So, thoughts? You're on mute, brother.
Olivier Nduhungirehe is an expert at putting his foot in his own mouth. I mean, this is something that he does all the time. He's talking about neutralizing the FDLR, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of Rwanda's top military, Kagame's number 2, General James Kabarebe, one of Congo's most notorious butchers from Rwanda, actually started in Uganda, where they all started out with Museveni butchering the Ugandan people. Remember there was a live weeks ago where someone said, let's not forget about Uganda. We know the butchering that is happening to the Congolese people started in Uganda. James Kabarebe was an officer in Uganda, then became an officer in Rwanda. Then eventually at one point, he was actually the military chief of staff in the Congo when the Rwandan regime was in charge of the Congolese government. This was before the very first regime, the Laurent Kabila regime in the late 90s. He, James Kabarebe, has said that the FDLR has been neutralized. It's no longer a threat to the Congo. Not only he, but many others in Rwanda's military and government have said this. So this guy now, Olivier Nduhungirehe, keeps repeating this thing about the Congolese government needs to neutralize the FDLR. But the FDLR has already been neutralized according to them. So this is like, you know, if you come in a house and the dishes are clean and it's like, and I'm like, okay, go wash the dishes again. But the dishes are already clean. And here you are making a mess in the house, you know, saying, hey, I'm not going to stop this mess until you clean the dishes that are, or that I have already told you, my regime has already told you they're clean. So it's a boogeyman that they've created. Now, there's also been reports and evidence showing that those neutralized FDLR combatants that went back to Rwanda were retrained and taken back into the Congo to invade the Congo on behalf of Rwanda. So I think what he's really talking about is that the Congolese government, at least this is how I think maybe the best way to at least take it, the Congolese government has an obligation to neutralize Rwanda's defense forces, the RPF forces, because that's who is bringing the FDLR into the Congo. And I don't, for me, use the language of the M23 is sponsored or supported by Rwanda, because I think that's a way of mainstream media and the gatekeepers and controlled opposition to try to bastardize who the M23 really are. The M23 is a part of Rwanda's military. And all of these things that are happening, you asked about the Washington Accord, and then all of this follow-up with the hearing and all of that. I think the best thing that came out of it is the fact that Rwanda admitted once again, I know you said it was for the first time, so another disagreement, once again, that they engage in coordination.
Have they admitted before? I think I did not mean to do that. But have they admitted before of supporting the M23? Not in my recollection. They've never admitted of supporting M23.
Well, you know, sometimes the admission doesn't have to be, I mean, it's just like right now, people aren't necessarily calling what's happening in the Congo a genocide. Now, you have scholars who will argue with you until the cows come home and say, oh, you know, we have to see this, we got to see documents. No, you can smell, see, and, you know, all the signs of genocide. The same way with Rwanda, Rwanda admitted that they are in the Congo as part of the M23. And I said this before. There's been many times when the M23 would whine and say, well, the M23 would whine and say, we're not included in these negotiations, when there was like peace talks, the supposedly peace talks in Angola and Nairobi and stuff like that. And I would say, no, the leader of the M23 is there, is Paul Kagame. And the way that they admitted it was when Paul Kagame actually, first of all, his minister, foreign minister, when he went and signed the peace deal on behalf of Rwanda, he was signing a peace deal. What peace deal was there? If Rwanda's not in the Congo, then why are they signing? The second time they did it was Paul Kagame also signing it. And I'm talking in recent times. But there has been times when Rwanda has denied invading the Congo. For years, there was a time for years. Here's how some of the other admissions worked without actually stating it the way it's written.
I see. You're talking about the implicit admission that they are doing something that make it obvious that, hey, why are you even part of the negotiation if you're saying that you don't have any connection, any link with the M23? Then why are you here sitting at the table talking about peace to us if you never declare war to us? And surely that corrupt Congolese government hasn't either. So why are you sitting and talking about war? So I get the point.
I mean, it's pretty open, honestly. I mean, like they're signing in front of the whole world. There is cameras and microphones. Everybody is seeing it. So the admission is for anybody that can actually, you know, think for a second. They'll know. I mean, a child would know that. Now,
Yes.
there's another time.
Mm-hmm.
Rwanda went for years and years and years denying that they invaded the Congo. And then they held a ceremony to welcome Rwandan soldiers who
Coming
had
back.
left the Congo. Okay,
Yeah.
like
When
this
they,
is like
yeah.
those are open admissions that
Yeah.
you know it's you can see it. So if you have no troops in Congo, why are you welcoming troops in Congo? And then there's a bunch of other things that we can see that where I think it goes to the implicit side of things. When the M23 captures people like the Romanian mercenaries
Mm-hmm.
or other things,
Just, yeah.
where do they go?
They send him back to Rwanda. I get it. I don't think that you and I we are disagreeing at all, right? I think
yeah,
there's just a
here
nuance,
is
right? A nuance.
they've admitted it many times,
Yeah.
and I think we just sometimes people don't really necessarily catch on to it right away, but for me it's like this is something that they've already admitted, and this is why they're part of this Washington Accord. Now, I think they are coming out lucky
Mm-hmm.
because it seems the accord does not include accountability. But this is what I said after they signed it in June.
Yeah.
I said, you know what? This is a really bad deal for the Congolese people. This is, I'm not sure why the Congolese government even agreed to sign it. But the big silver lining in the whole thing is that the the ruling regime tyrant in Rwanda, Paul Kagame, and pretty much Rwanda in general as the regime is the RPF. The
Mm-hmm.
RPF never respects any agreements they sign. That was going to be the saving grace in all of this, because at the end of the day they were going to be found to they were going to breach them, and hopefully there will be consequences. Now, this time they have it in writing. They said that they engage in security coordination. So that's even better.
What I wanted to show this really quick is that there's I don't think that you and I we are necessarily disagreeing. I think there's just a nuance there. I was mostly talking about like how the Rwandan governments, when they were asked directly about them supporting the M23, they has said no, and I've shown clips. Right, they have denied involvement in Eastern Congo at all. They were even talking about defensive measure. They denied troops, they denied command, they denied support, they denied everything. That denier we can see now no longer holds. And I'm going to show there is first this. Let me see. Yeah, he says, we thank Chairman Smith and the committee for their attention to this important matter. Rwanda's position is simple. Our national security is non-negotiable. After decades of cross-border genocidal threats from FDLR and allied militias, defensive measures are about protecting lives, not politics. Peace must be built on real security. Full statement for the records by, obviously, the ambassador Mukantambana. Sorry if I'm butchering her name. And I'm going to show this part that to me was crazy, right? Like when we talking about that admission, and you can see, I think that's just the third page, talks about Rana's defensive measure, and it says, for this reason, Rwanda does engage in security coordination with the AFC M23. I state this clearly to build trust through transparency. M23 is independent, Congolese group with its own legitimate grievance against Kinshasa, including killings, rapes, and systematic discrimination against Congolese Tutsi population, broken commitment under previous peace agreement, stretching back to decades of exclusion from political process. But I want to stop there because I think the most important part for us, for the purpose of our conversation here, is that they are saying that in one line, that Rwanda does engage in security coordination with the M23. And that is consequential, right? Don't you think? Like when they are admitting, and I'm really trying to process why would they even admit this right now? So why do you think the Rwandan government will admit supporting the
Yes.
M23 openly now, right? It was covered, it was implicit, but now they have said it. Yes, we support the M23, and they go into explaining why they support the M23. And you said at the beginning, you talked about the genocide, you talked about the Tutsis and how also the Hutu are being used. But really, like, I want to really pick your brain. Like, why, according to you, would the Rwandan government admit right now?
You know, let me just start by saying I love this ambassador, but I think she's stupid as shit because it's not the first time that she's outed Rwanda's uh, government um, in their action. Maybe she wrote that statement using AI and didn't read it and review it before she put it out. I'm not sure, but um, the the thing is this: what they just did by admitting this openly is probably because of pressure. Someone put pressure on them to actually admit it. They're like, well, you really cannot lie about this. I mean, and again, we've already demonstrated that Rwandan troops are in the Congo. Um, we even speak with Rwandan soldiers who've been deployed to the Congo. We know some of the commanders who were killed in battle in the Congo. So the evidence is there. Maybe somebody said, look, it's getting ridiculous. Y'all need to stop, admit it, and talk about it.
Mm.
So especially because this is something that is prepared, I don't think it was just one of her usual missteps. She did have a misstep with me before. Back in 2018, I met with her. And this guy, this American guy that actually visited us from Congo, got us to meet. We went to a commemoration that she was leading, a genocide commemoration, and then later we met. When I started talking about the atrocities in the Congo, she threatened to leave. She got up and started leaving in in an angry outburst. And I said, I was like, hey, I'm not backing off on this. This is what your regime is doing. And the guy who brought us together was like getting real uncomfortable. And then, but she stayed long enough to reveal that she was sending people to stalk me and other activists in in the US when we have events and stuff like that. And what happened was there was before that we had a press conference not long before that. We had a press conference at the National Press Club in DC. There was this one guy. His name is Louis Gakumba. Now I know the name because of the ambassador. This guy came and he claimed that he was Congolese. And somehow Kambale, who is, my brother Kambale, big time Congolese activist, long time Congolese activist, he put out a picture of this guy because, he was in a public event and he goes, look, this guy came claiming he's Congolese, but we're finding out he's Rwandan. People said, yeah, he's Rwandan and all of that. Then when I met with this ambassador, she said, yeah, I sent this guy to come look for you. And she told me the name. When I looked the name up, the guy's picture came up. So now we were able to put this one guy who was coming to our events claiming he's Congolese, Louis Gakumba, who might be watching also, and who used to pop up at every event that I would do in DC. That he not just pop up, like he was coming to harass and the same thing that the embassy does, Rwanda's embassies do in different parts of the world. So she gives me the name just like that. So anyway, when I first read this document, I was like, okay, maybe she had a similar thing where she slipped. Then I was like, you know what? Maybe she wrote it using AI. And then later I was like, maybe this document is fake. And then eventually, my analysis now is, I think they're putting so much pressure on them to admit that they're doing this, especially after the takeover of Uvira, where even the U.S. government started, calling them out for commanding and saying Paul Kagame is the commander of the M23, which he is. I guess I'm glad they finally agreed with the things that we've been saying for a while. That, when you're negotiating with the M23 and Kagame is there, their commander's there. So I think that they're under pressure to actually make that admission.
And talking about pressure, let me first read this statement that was from the, I think her name is there you go, Sarah Trutman. Sorry, she said, "Well, she's the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Central Africa at the U.S. Department of State." So she said, "We will ensure that the promises made in Washington are kept, that the peace process delivers real results so that the people of the region see tangible improvement in their lives, and that the conditions for increased U.S. investment are realized. Transparency and accountability are central at every stage, and those who threaten peace will be held responsible. As Secretary Rubio said, we will take action to ensure promises made to the president are kept." I think that's the pressure that you are probably referring to, and that they are talking about. Now, but we have a question. I think it will be interesting for you maybe to take a stab at it. Hi, brother. Does Rwanda know what will be the downside of Rwanda behavior? Is there understanding what they're trying to say? Is that we encourage Rwanda to do what it's doing in Congo? Yeah.
I mean, I think I understand Kivo's question. Basically, he's saying, is Rwanda acting on its own independent will? And we know that, and I think that's important for the audience to know, that when we're talking about Rwanda invading Congo, Rwanda is one of the poorest countries in the world. They cannot afford the weapons that they have. They cannot afford GPS jamming equipment, air defense systems, thousands and thousands of troops, night vision goggles, and all of that stuff. They receive them from their Western puppet masters, which the US is one of them, the UK is another, and you have the European Union, and a number of others. And we've seen that. We have evidence of this, not only over the past 30 years with the support that they get and the different types of deals that they actually get. But Rwanda is willing to do and harm other Africans in order to advance the interest of Western multinationals. Now, there are a number of, if you look at, like, one of the things that I like to cite is, I believe it was December 2022. I could be mistaken about the year. The European Union put out announcements saying, or communications saying, Rwanda needs to stop what it's doing in the Congo. I mean, it was phrased differently. And then after that, the condemnation, that lip service to the Congolese people, that lip service to the people who are suffering, they turned around and they give Rwanda's military 20 million euros.
Yeah.
And they gave it to the military. They didn't just give it to any other program. It was to the military. And they said, oh yeah, this is to go and support the operations in Mozambique. So, like, Rwanda was going to get weapons or whatever they get from that 20 million and just be like, okay, yeah, we're just going to take this to Mozambique, when they're right there fighting in the Congo and committing a genocide against the Congolese people. In fact, by doing that, or when they did that, that frees resources. Even if, let's just say, they take every one of that support and they use it in Mozambique, and none of it is moved over to go into the Congo, that frees resources for them to continue wreaking havoc on the Congolese people. fighting their wars on the bodies of the Congolese women whose genitals they go and amputate and assault in the most heinous type of ways. So now, why is our Rwandan troops in Mozambique, in Cabo Delgado? They're there to secure the interest of French oil giant Total. And Rwandan troops are in many different parts of the world. So I think it's important. The question that Kiv was asking is, well, Rwanda has masters. They're not acting on their own will. You know, are they okay now to withdraw? The thing is, the U.S., if the U.S. says get out, Rwanda will get out. And we have evidence. And you've seen when Belgium, for example, has denounced the actions of Rwanda in the Congo, they start a war of words. Like Rwanda will say, yeah, we're kicking out your diplomats. We are kicking out, you know, we're stopping diplomatic relations. Belgians are colonizers and all of that. I dare you, Paul Kagame. I dare you, Nduhungirehe, Kagame's puppet. I dare you, Rwandan regime. I dare anybody, any general in Rwanda, to turn around and do that with U.S. diplomats or others and be like, because why? Because Rwanda depends on the U.S. Rwanda, again, as one of the poorest countries in the world, receives aid. In fact, by the way, before the signing of the minerals deal, which they call the peace deal, in December, the U.S. approved 150 million in the State Department approved $150 million worth of zipline drones to Rwanda, supposedly for healthcare transportation. Okay, this is the same State Department that was part of the U.S. government that used Elon Musk, the Nazi salute giving white supremacist, who they use
ban us next.
right with that Doge thing that they put together, and they stopped U.S. aid. But then they're turning around and they're doing the same, basically the same thing. They're sending those things to Kagame's regime and the RPF regime in Rwanda, and I guarantee you, those drones, I mean, $150 million worth of drones. First of all, Rwanda is a very small country. It's the size of Maryland. It's very tiny. So they're not going to need that much. They're also poor. They don't have a lot to transport. A lot of these drones are going to be used, and that's if this deal works. You know, I mean, Trump deals, you know, sometimes you never know if they get the $150 million. But these drones are going to end up used for military operations, for surveillance, for spying, and for different things. And so all of this to say, and I'll give you a last example why the U.S. has so much leverage on Paul Kagame, and why I dare you, Paul Kagame, I dare you, Olivier Nduhungirehe, and anybody else in Rwanda's regime to come for the U.S. government. The reason, one of the things previously that happened is Rwanda's regime kidnapped one of the real heroes of the genocide in Rwanda. There were many real heroes, people who really saved lives, not like Paul Kagame, who says he stopped the genocide when actually he was a part of it and even started it. Paul Kagame and the RPF and their soldiers. This person is Paul Rusesabagina, who sheltered over 1,000 people in a hotel during the genocide. It was hard. People survived because they were sheltered by their neighbors. That's how I survived, me and my mom and my sisters, and many other people that we sheltered in other places together. Paul Kagame, so it was a Paul on Paul crime. Paul Kagame kidnapped Paul Rusesabagina. Yeah, he committed a Paul on Paul crime. Paul Rusesabagina was in Texas when they lured him to Dubai using one of his friends, a bishop. This bishop then said, you know, I'm going to set you up with a bunch of talks in Burundi. So when you get to Burundi, you're going to have all these talks and stuff like that. So come on over to Dubai and let's fly down. He gets to Dubai. They put him on a private jet. He finds himself in Rwanda, in Kigali. They tortured him. They refused to give him his medicine, even though he's a cancer survivor and he had like health conditions. They then put him on trial, a sham trial, and convicted him to 25 years of prison. And he didn't even make 5 years. The U.S. said, we're gonna stop sending you this $90 million. This was in 23. They kidnapped him in 2020. In March 2023, they released him, even though in December 2022, while the European Parliament or European Union was giving him $20 million to continue wreaking havoc for his military, Paul Kagame said, I would never release Paul Rusesabagina. It will take an invasion into Rwanda in order for me to release him. But the invasion happened. It was no weapons, nothing. It was just the US was like, hey, you can get this $90 million. And guess where Paul Rusesabagina is right now? He's chilling in Texas. And so that's all to say for that question. It's yes, Kagame has masters. And his masters.
And something to point out, and thank you for that. And something to point out for the release of Paul Rusesabagina is that Secretary Rubio, who was a senator at the time, he was one of the senators at the forefront of his freedom. They wanted to expand. I forgot the law that they put in place to rescue all the American and bring them home, and they want to expand that law to, and also include permanent residents, that any American citizen, any U.S. citizen captured or imprisoned overseas, whether it's in Russia, in China, or in Iran, that there were going to be a diplomatic effort to bring them back home. And they expanded it to also include permanent residents. Secretary Rubio, senator at the time, was at the forefront of that. But that's a really good segue, because we have Niels here that is going to kind of like talk us more into the briefing, the hearing, because I watched it online, but he was present physically. But before, I'm going to show you guys this video. Let me see if I can share my screen here. It will be, I think it was Congresswoman speaking. Let's do that.
Sarah Jacobs, our distinguished ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this very timely hearing. And Deputy Assistant Secretary Troutman, thank you for testifying before our committee today. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is facing an unprecedented humanitarian crisis, with 7.3 million internally displaced persons and over 7,000 killed in 2025 alone. More than 26 million people are experiencing life-threatening levels of acute food insecurity. It is one of the most complex and long-standing humanitarian crises in the world. While the latest escalation between DRC and Rwanda started in 2022, the conflict in eastern DRC has been ongoing for at least 3 decades. Civilians have suffered the most under this conflict, either being caught in the crossfire or being targeted by armed groups. Conflict-related sexual violence have reached epidemic levels in eastern DRC. Cases have only escalated this year, while impunity for its perpetrators, including the M23 and other armed groups and military forces, prevails. So I do appreciate President Trump's high-level attention to this conflict that is too often ignored and put on the back burner. But this conflict and the people of DRC, they deserve sustained high-level attention and care, and not a fleeting concern that gets easily forgotten. And I would argue that the president's promises and statements that he has already ended the war between DRC and Rwanda ring hollow, when we are in fact not seeing peace or stability on the ground at all. I'm also concerned that the lack of consultation and inclusion of civil society and local communities is setting up the peace process to fail before it even gets off the ground. Only 5 days after the signing of the Washington Accords between President Tshisekedi and President Kagame, hosted by President Trump, the M23, co-located with the Rwandans along the front lines, took over the strategic city of Uvira in South Kivu. And while M23 has reportedly retreated partially from Uvira, we still have not seen the full retreat to 75 kilometers outside of Uvira back to Kamanyola, as the United States called for in December. And We are now receiving reports of reprisal attacks against the Banyamulenge, a Congolese Tutsi community, and other civilians accused of supporting the M23 by the Wazalendo and other armed bandits. This is on top of nearly a year of M23's occupation of Goma and Bukavu, two other extremely important cities in the Kivus, where civilians have faced atrocities, executions, and other abuses. Both parties have made commitments that they have failed to maintain. Rwanda clearly continues to support the M23 and deploy its own forces. The latest numbers ranging from 5,000 to 7,000 troops in eastern Congo, not including the latest Uvira offensive, in violation of the DRC's sovereignty. The DRC military, for its part, has reportedly continued a collaboration with the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda, FDLR, a militia founded by the leaders of the 1994 Rwanda genocide in contravention of the Accords. And despite Secretary Rubio's and Ambassador Waltz's promises a month ago that they would use the tools at our disposal to hold Rwanda accountable and, quote, ensure promises made by Rwanda to the president are kept, the administration has still not announced any new sanctions or accountability measures against Rwanda or the M23. To me, it's very clear. Rwanda needs to stop supporting the M23 and stop its own occupation of the DRC so the Congolese people can finally be on the path to peace, not more war. So I urge the Trump administration to make good on its promises to hold Rwanda and other spoilers to peace accountable. And I look forward to hearing from Ms. Troutman on how the department plans to take these actions.
You're on mute.
I have been on mute the whole time. My apologies. So want to welcome Niels for joining us. And for those who don't know Niels, he's the OG, he's the GOAT, attorney and commissioner as well. So welcome back to Congo Unfiltered. So I was saying that we talking about the hearing, right? We're talking about this. We are trying to have an idea of what's going on, what happened there. But brother, you were there physically. So tell us first, because I was kind of confused because I was hoping to hear some sort of testimony from the Congolese civil society. But talk to us about what happened, what you saw, and also that speech from Representative Jacobs was. I think it was great because she was able to bring home our concerns. So talk to us about what happened there and yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me, Gaetan, my brother Claude. Also, always good to be in community with you. So I really do appreciate this conversation. Yes, so this hearing was a very important opportunity for the stakeholders to voice their concerns and highlight what's working and what's not working. A couple of things that I want to highlight maybe before we dive into the details. So the committee itself, the Africa subcommittee in the House, include 11 members. So there are 11 members of Congress that are part of this committee. And for this hearing, only 6 showed up. And only 2 stayed there, or 3 stayed there for the entire time. On the Republican side, there were only 2, Chris Smith, the chairman, and Ronnie Jackson. And the Democrats who were in the minority there were 4 of them. Sarah Jacobs, the ranking member, Representative Otrisky, Chair Phyllis McCormick, and then Jonathan Jackson. So that I think that was the first thing that surprised us for the people who attended, that were there in person, was like, well, I mean, we were expecting more than 6 members and more than 2 or 3 to stay there, to be engaged fully the whole time. So that was the first thing. Now, the second thing about civil society, and Gaetan, you heard Congresswoman Jacobs talk about civil society, inclusion of civil society in the peace process. So something that they have repeated, that civil society must be included in the process. But the irony here is that, Congress is not including their own committee, their own subcommittee. They're not including civil society. So now they're telling the administration, right? You have to include civil society. Civil society need to be part of the process, part of the talks. But now, in this type of forum will be an ideal forum, an appropriate forum for civil society to be included. However, civil society was not included. We heard that they were considering including civil society, but that was for some reason removed from the program. So they decided not to go with civil society. So it's important.
Did they provide a reason?
No reason so far. I wish someone could have asked. So number one is that we have to hold everyone accountable. If the department, if the administration is not, if Congress is asking the administration to include civil society in those talks, then they should do the same. Then especially the subcommittee on this subject on Africa should include civil society. So that's the answer to your question to get started.
Yeah, and let me play this because that was crazy because you talk about Representative Ronnie Jackson, and let me see if I can find that clip. I hope that's the clip. Critical minerals. I think it's this one. Let me play this clip.
Point to everybody that the U.S. is a much better partner than the Chinese. We're there to if we make agreements, regarding the natural resources, we're paying for them, and we're paying appropriately for them. We're not robbing these countries of some of their natural resources, which I think is what the Chinese do.
Another one.
A plan that I've discussed with multiple heads of state in the area, including Rwanda and DRC, is that the region could create an economic framework where neighboring countries would manage separate segments of the critical mineral supply chain coming from the eastern DRC. Now, I'm not suggesting that the DRC should give resources away. They belong to the DRC.
What you're suggesting.
But what I am suggesting is that if this becomes a situation where it's mutually beneficial for everyone to have peace in the region because it's financially beneficial for everyone to have peace in the region, then I think that goes a long ways toward establishing lasting peace.
Two more.
A plan that I've discussed with multiple heads of state in the area, including Rwanda and DRC, is that the region could create an economic framework where neighboring countries would manage separate segments of the critical mineral supply chain coming from the eastern DRC. Now, I'm not suggesting that the DRC should give resources away. They belong to the DRC. But what I am suggesting is that if this becomes a situation where it's mutually beneficial for everyone to have peace in the region because it's financially beneficial for everyone to have peace in the region, then I think that goes a long ways toward establishing lasting peace. And I've proposed multiple times that there should be agreement between the countries, and not just Rwanda and the DRC, but the DRC and Burundi, the DRC and Uganda, some of their neighbors, that everyone benefits from the trillions, the tens of trillions of dollars of rare earths that are currently in the eastern DRC. It's one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest, in the world with regards to some of these natural resources. So, if these could be mined, in the DRC and then refined or processed in the neighboring countries, everyone would have a vested interest in making sure that peace is maintained in the area. I also think that another area that's big here is that in order to get the physical security that we talked about, well, first off, let me just say that once that happens, another area that I've stressed really strongly is that the resources that come from this agreement down the road, if this were to take place, and some of this tremendous wealth were realized by the DRC and its neighboring countries, as I described, I think that it's absolutely critical that these resources have to be reinvested in the people of the DRC, the infrastructure. They have to see their lives getting better based on these minerals, being processed and sold.
Thoughts? Because I found Representative Ronnie Jackson very interesting, because it is the same guy who last year, back in March, and this is what he said.
It's been a long-standing issue, is my understanding, that there are certain people in the Eastern DRC that are unrecognized as Congolese citizens, and that maybe in part because this used, it's been a long-standing issue, is my understanding, that there are certain people in the Eastern DRC that are unrecognized as Congolese citizens, and that maybe in part because this used to be Rwanda before the lines were redrawn many years ago, and and that used to be part of Rwanda.
So, first of all, your impression of the things that were being said about the Congo, particularly when Representative Ronnie Jackson.
I'm sorry.
Mute.
I'm sorry, but I guess for Ronnie Jackson, that means also Mexico can invade the U.S. because Texas and New Mexico and some parts of the U.S. were before the lines were drawn at some point, or some of the territories bought or invaded and taken over, that those were part of Mexico. I mean, like, that logic makes no sense, and it's come up many times where people will say, yeah, some of those parts, maybe they were Rwanda. Okay, but then you would have wars all over the whole continent of Africa. You have, when you look at Congo, between Angola, the DRC, and the Republic of Congo, they have the same ethnic groups of people. Congo and the Central African Republic, Congo and Uganda, Congo and Rwanda, Congo and Burundi, Congo and Tanzania, Congo and Zambia. And so then every one of those countries also has other countries that they share people of the same ethnicity. I mean, you look at Kenya, Uganda, and South Sudan with the Luo people, for example. Kenya and Tanzania with the Maasai, or Kenya and Somalia with Kenyan Somalis and Somalian Somalis. It's like this argument is nonsense. But let me go back on mute. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much for just speaking your mind. And then that's the feeling that I have. Niels, what do you think? What was being said about the Congo, particularly when Representative Ronnie Jackson took the mic?
I'm sorry to say this, but I feel like there is really a lack of understanding, and maybe I don't know how much exposure the congressman has had to Congo and to the region. He said that he has traveled, he has visited the region a few times. I'm really not sure, his understanding of the region and this conflict is based on, what type of history or fact. Now, I'm not going to go back to what Claude said, but that's a very important part. We should not even go back to the whole argument around the lines and the borders and the territory is absurd. We don't need to address that. But a couple of points that the congressman raised. One is that he mentioned that we should, and you play that in the clip, that we should maybe build a framework, an economic framework that will be beneficial to the countries in the region. Now, you don't have to go back, too much into history to find out that we have tried that. A few things that the congressman mentioned, like integrating, and sorry, I'm going from one point to another very quickly, but integrating M23 into the Congolese army, or a framework that will benefit all the countries in the region. We've tried all of that. President Tshisekedi, when he took power in 2019, April 2019, that same year, he signed an MOU with Rwanda. And again, June 2021, other major MOUs and economic agreement were signed with Rwanda. But that did not stop Paul Kagame from pursuing the war in Congo, from pursuing aggression against Congo. So, you know, sometimes you just don't use common sense. You're like the conflict, and that's why we keep telling members of Congress that this conflict is delicate. This conflict, you have to know history. You have to be grounded in fact, in history, why has worked and why has not worked. It's so absurd that the congressman thinks that integrating M23 into the army will be a path to peace. We have tried that multiple times. It has not worked. So it's important here. And then this is my appeal, to the Congolese diaspora in the congressman district. Please reach out to his office and educate him and his advisors, his people, his office, because what he's suggesting now has been put into practice in the past. Has not worked. But also, this hearing, Gaetan, just shows how Congress is divided. When you listen to the hearing, you see that two trends emerged. So on the Democratic side, you see there are a lot of the comments or the interventions were around humanitarian crisis, were around integration of civil society in the peace talks, and then also the project timelines. Now, I'm not sure if you're going to play the responses from the Deputy Assistant Secretary. One thing major that the Democratic members focused on was the timeline and the benchmarks for the Washington Accord. And to everyone's surprise, we find out that the State Department does not have any timeline, does not have any benchmarks, does not have any. So it's even hard to evaluate what has worked, what has not worked. So that's very important. But on the Republican side, now most of the comments or the intervention were around resource sharing. And Chris the chairman, made a comment about the fact that President Trump cannot be blamed for non-compliance. If Rwanda decide not to comply with the agreement, you cannot blame the person who brought them together. So, anyways, you see that it's a very delicate political climate here in DC, where like the government is divided. It's really hard when the government with such division. I'm really worried that we might not be able to get much traction from or result from this agreement, the Washington Accord.
And just to kind of like kind of piggyback to what you're saying, one, I think we can't really deny who Representative Ronnie Jackson is, right? That he's not just a regular member of Congress. I believe, let me just see if I can put it right there. I believe he's also the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee on Intelligence and Special Operation. Intelligence. So, I mean, I don't know how you can be this, sorry to say the term, ignorant. How you can be so ignorant on the issue of the Congo in that regard, when you are getting briefed, and that's why my also call is not just for the Congolese people, the Congolese American is district, but friends of the Congo, the people who care about Congolese people, about human rights, about humanity, about not having the tax dollars being used to fund a war, being used to pay to fund a nation that is committing human rights violation. And then Representative, I think Chris Smith, he talks about using the Global Magnitsky Act, Human Rights Accountability Act, which essentially was enacted in 2016 and authorizes the U.S. government to impose economic sanction and visa restrictions on foreign individuals and entities globally that are responsible for gross human rights violations. We also have the Child Soldier Prevention Act that somehow for the 2025, both the Congo and Rwanda were removed from that. And we all know that Rwanda has admitted today or a couple days ago that they are supporting the M23. And the M23 has been accused, and that has been verified and documented by credible sources. I'm talking about Global Witness. I'm talking about Human Rights Watch. I'm talking about Amnesty International, that we had Kate Hilson on this space here talk about the atrocities that the M23 was doing. And we're also talking about the United Nations. We're also talking about the United States that has sanctioned some of those members of the M23. And including James Kabarebe, that Claude mentioned at the beginning of the show, for essentially supporting the M23. There is also the law, the Public Law 109-456, Section 105, that also says that the U.S. Secretary of State, so Secretary Rubio, has the power to withdraw aids to any country that is destabilizing the Congo. But what rhetoric do we listen or do we hear from Representative Ronnie Jackson is that if we want peace, we need to share our wealth to our neighbors, to Rwanda. But that's not what the law says. So I'm very confused because you talked about the timeline, but I'm going to go ahead and play this video that to me personally is really obvious about what the U.S. motive is in the Congo and how essentially the Congolese people are once again ignored. So let's play this quickly.
For the chance to elaborate a bit more on the strategic partnership agreement that the U.S. made with the DRC, because it addresses all of these issues. So we know that Chinese companies have a vast majority of ownership over critical mineral assets in the DRC, especially copper and cobalt assets, and those are critical for U.S. supply chain security, especially important for our efforts to be dominant in emerging technology and to supply the defense industrial base. So part of the strategic agreement, the strategic partnership agreement with the DRC is aimed at making sure that U.S. companies have preferential access to strategic assets in the DRC, which we will work with the DRC to designate. So the purpose of that is to get U.S. companies in the door, prevent Chinese companies from taking over more of these assets, and to make sure that the offtake is coming to the United States to reduce our reliance on the refined minerals coming from China. So certainly this agreement is aimed at reasserting U.S. dominance in the critical minerals sector, also making sure that the DRC is able to profit from its resources, because as you said, Chinese companies often have the lowest standards. They're exploiting the system, they're exploiting corruption, and we certainly don't want to see that. It's bad for U.S. companies trying to invest. It's bad for the people of the DRC. So we are looking forward to implementing this agreement to really cement the opportunities for U.S. companies in the DRC and in these critical mineral supply chains, and also to make sure that China's influence is reduced. And on the issue of corruption, part of the strategic partnership agreement also addresses regulatory issues, making sure that the DRC's mining sector is cleaned up so that U.S. companies can be more confident when they're investing, and that the regulations are easier to navigate. So all of this is aimed at the exact issue that you raised, and that we are very concerned with how embedded Chinese companies are in the DRC.
So when a U.S. congressman says that Eastern Congo is used to be part of Rwanda, that's not a mistake, and I show that the guy is not just a regular member of the Congress. This is a narrative that is being used to kind of like justify certain policy of invasion, and how and Brother Claude say that how borders are being questioned, which kind of trickle down to the whole world, and how the international law or sovereignty will work now. Like, can you just invade any country because that country used to be part of yours, or because you are powerful? That invasion there is kind of like sanitized, right? And another thing too that you said yourself, Brother Niels, is that there is a division that we can see, Democrats, Republicans, and also how one party is talking about humanitarian and civilians. And even if the Democratic Party also trying to exclude the civil society, and you mentioned that, right? But also on the other side, the talking point that we see from the Republicans is also going specifically into the minerals aspect, to using what's happened in Congo, that Congolese people are expendable, that what really matters is the peace that is being engineered, not so that there is justice for the Congolese people, but so that the minerals, the corridors, and then that stability allows the supply chain to continue to flow while the Congolese lives are being ignored. That stability matters more than Congolese consent, that Congolese sovereignty. So I really want to know, and that's the piece that I played, and you were sitting through the whole thing. So, and with the work that you're doing with the Congolese, the DRC diaspora desk, into just organizing and also go and meet with senators and congressmen and women, and just trying to have the issue of the Congo being talked about. But what's your reaction when you hear all those things?
No, but it's very unfortunate, right? Congo is seen here as a battleground, right? Like, and the competition is between China and the US. And you heard Ronnie Jackson talk about that we always encourage African leaders to choose the US over China. And so, yeah, so that's how they're treating Congo essentially. And the Deputy Assistant Secretary also alluded to that the goal is to counter Chinese efforts in the critical mineral sector. I think these are things that the Congolese government should take into consideration. And I have to say here that the representatives of Congolese government at that hearing, they were sitting there behind the Deputy Assistant Secretary. So I hope that these are the things that they take into consideration, because as long as we're a battleground for competition, we're not gonna we just need to be careful, because we are seen as the field, as the battleground where the competition is taking place. But in terms of the agreement itself, I'm not an expert in project management, but if you are taking on any project, there are basic things that you need to put in place. Right? You need to have a timeline. You need to have benchmarks. Key performance indicators, KPIs. For those of you who are familiar with project management. But it seems like these agreements, the Washington Accord, lack all of them. All of these things. There is no timeline. There's no KPIs. There's no benchmarks. So it's really hard, to evaluate. And then you see with the Congress, especially on the Democratic side, the pressing on the timeline, the pressing on the consequences, the punitive actions that the US can take, and no clear answer. So at some point, the Deputy Assistant Secretary mentioned that some of the questions, they were above her pay grade. So I don't know if, and again, it's very hard to believe some of these responses, but this is something that we really need to press on as advocates, and as advocate or friends of the Congo, people that are interested in Congo. We need to push for more accountability not only to the parties, here, Rwanda and DRC, but also to the mediator, right? So if the US brokered this agreement, we need to know what is the timeline. This could take 5-10 years, and we know that this administration is 3 years. So those are, I think it was good for us to see where the administration stand. And then there's so many questions here that are not answered. But also, we also learned that State Department is actually not fully staffed to address the situation in the DRC and in the region, right? Like, so you have, and I think if you go back to what Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs described, where there used to be an assistant secretary dedicated to African affairs, right? But now that position is still vacant. You have senior advisor Bulos, who's not accountable to Congress, right? And that it becomes tricky, when you have actors that are not accountable to Congress or cannot answer to Congress. It becomes tricky because that really impedes congressional oversight. The Congress is limited to any oversight they can do on senior advisor Bulos' work on the ground. We don't know if that's a strategic decision for this administration, but you also have State Department that they don't have answers to a lot of the questions that the Congolese people are asking, even the American people and the Congress people are asking. So it's good for us to know these challenges, so that I hope that this can inform our effort as we try to engage not only us, the Congolese advocates, but also anybody interested in Congo. The findings from this hearing should inform how we should engage with Congress and the administration with regard to the Washington Accord.
And Claus, I know you have a background in project management, so any comments from what Neil said? Like, you have a whole administration that put forward contracts and accord, but they don't seem to know how they're doing, what the heck they're doing, if I have to use Donald Trump's language.
If I give my professional advice here, who do I send the bill to? Do I send it to the administration? Or
listen. Hey, they're already taking out minerals, so they will pay you for that. Go ahead.
Consultancy cannot be included in this minerals deal, But Niels is correct. Like, some of the basics, the very basics of project management is knowing the scope, the budget, the timeline, and understanding what are your success factors. What are your critical success factors? How do you measure success? And also knowing what steps, when you have a real plan, your plan is going to have like the details of the activities and, tasks and stuff like that. But you also have milestones, like, this is where we get to this. And when we get to this, we've achieved a certain, success in the project, and so on and so forth. So for me, as Neil said, it's not being managed like a real project. And I'm not sure that they're looking at it as a project anyway. But going back to the conversation and getting away from the consultancy, then until I know who to send the bill to, I love the work that Niels is doing. And I think what is, to me, why it's important is because Americans get to actually voice to the representative about this issue. So there is what is happening on the ground in the Congo and everything, but then you also have people who are a part of the community, who are constituents, who are asking for answers. Now, for part of this, this was obviously before the minerals deal, but for part of this latest fight, this latest spike in the violence in the ongoing 30-year genocide that Rwanda and Uganda have been waging in Congo, there was a democratic leadership for half of the time. And they were not saying, they didn't have the same energy that we're seeing right now. So to me, I want them to keep asking these questions. I want them to keep pushing. Also, the State Department, Niels, I'm not sure if you were in backstage when I talked about it. The State Department approved a $150 million deal, $50 million deal with Rwanda for zipline drones right before the signing of the minerals deal in December by Paul Kagame and Tshisekedi. They have leverage. By the way, this is supposed to be like a $225 million project, I think, from what I read on this. And the U.S. is giving 150 million. Rwanda's gonna come up with 75 million dollars. I'm gonna withhold my thoughts on how all this money is gonna come about and what's gonna actually happen. What I think is gonna happen, but it's gonna be similar to how aid used to be sent, and most of it was actually to the Americans, or not just the Americans, but the donors, you know. But they all have all this leverage. And there is like so many different things that can be done in a variety of committees, including the Armed Services Committee, including the budgeting committees, the Foreign Relations Committee. I mean, so many different committees that can address this, that I guess it just doesn't stop in that hearing. And then, of course, like, you know, as you both said, it seems, you know, the division is always it's always there, but what it takes is the work that you're doing, Niels, because that's what actually moves the needle. When you have the constituents pushing for accountability, that's when you can have people change their positions. And it's important, especially now, because it's almost midterm in the US. And, you know, of course, a lot of people in the US are not really thinking about Congo. They're not connecting how Congo is connected to what's happening in the US. I think it's important to make that connection. I had an event in November with a community that is in rural Georgia. And during that event, I talked about basically the race for critical minerals and how those are connected. So I, you know, talked about these atrocities in the Congo, in Rwanda, in Uganda. I always make the connection that what is happening in the Congo, there's this narrative out there that is, I find it problematic, where people say the violence in the Congo is rooted in the Rwandan genocide. Everybody has eaten that propaganda up, from corporate media and legacy media and gatekeepers and controlled opposition. But this started way before. It didn't start in '94 with the genocide. It didn't start with Rwandans fleeing into Congo. It didn't even start with Rwanda's war. The training and all of the atrocities that are happening, it started in Uganda when Museveni started that bush war and recruited Paul Kagame and other Rwandan, exiled Rwandans into his rebel groups, committed similar activities to what, I mean, atrocities to what we're seeing in the Congo. Then they won, and then they went to, they came to Rwanda, where they went to Rwanda, invaded Rwanda, did the same thing, and then later on they invaded the Congo, and they are still doing the same thing. Going back to 1980 or 81, how many years is that? Like 45 years, 45, 46 years, you know, and Congo's bore the brunt of it. A lot of Americans, back to the point, are unaware of what is happening. But let me make this connection. And, you know, this connects to even all of these mass deportations, you know, where farmers, for example, farming communities are losing their farms, and people who are buying them, when they're bankrupt, they're buying them cheap. You know, it goes to the, by the way, Rwanda is one of the countries that is taking deportees that are deported from the US, and some of the ones who've been deported there have already left Rwanda. So you have the mass deportations. You basically have people losing their farms because, one, the tariffs are not allowing them to sell to their usual markets, and they don't have the labor, even though it was exploitative labor. And these farms are being bought cheap. And guess what's being built on these farms? Can I get a guess from either one of you? Data centers. And data centers consume a lot of water, a lot of resources. And so now, what is connected? How does Congo connect to the data centers? Yeah, both of y'all can make that connection. I know you can. But in these communities, people are unaware that what is happening in the Congo is actually directly connected to their communities. And some of these districts are actually incentivizing companies to come there and build these data centers and giving them tax breaks and things like that. And I think that's important education in the work that you're doing, Nils, in the advocacy work that you're doing, in making sure that the constituents know this, and Congo can become a part of the equation in the midterms. That's where I was going with this.
Yeah, thank you, Niels. Really quick, because I didn't have your opinion about the news of Rwanda finally admitting. If you can really briefly give like your what you think about the Rwandan ambassador, and you said that she never. Well, we talked offline, and you said that they never actually testified, so they just tweeted and they submitted that to the committee. But what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the chairman mentioned that during the hearing that both governments were submitting statement for the record. Well,
did you even hear the Congolese? I didn't even see the Congolese statement anywhere. Again, that's the thing that I hate about the Congolese government.
Yeah.
Anyways, so far.
No, but that's a good point. That's why I was actually offline. I was actually telling I just read, you sent it to me, the statement from the Rwandan government. But yeah, we would also love to see the statement from the Congolese government that was submitted for the record. Gaetan, this is not a surprise to any of us. Rwanda admitting to the support. So, I mean, I don't even know how to answer that question. It's no surprise. I mean, but we have it on the record, right? So good thing we have it on the record. And now we don't want, because the situation in Congo, it has become a cycle, right? And also when you have administrations or Congress changing here in DC, there could be some misunderstanding, there could be some confusion, there could be some unclear facts. But since we have this on the record, it will actually help our advocacy efforts. Next time you go talk to your member of Congress, tell them that, hey, Rwanda support M23, and we have this on the record. So I think this will help us. So even with the next Congress, because there's election in November, even with the next Congress, we can point to that statement that's now part of congressional record. So I would highly encourage anyone who's in contact with members of Congress, having conversation with members of Congress, to have this statement with you and submit it to your member of Congress. And, this is something that we hope will help us explain what's happening in Congo. Because there's one thing that the Paul Kagame has done is to feed the misinformation, the disinformation. I'm not going to call it poison rwandais, but there is definitely misinformation, disinformation within the diaspora, with members of Congress. And so the issue, maybe also that misinformation or disinformation is contributing to some of the comments that these congressmen are making. I'm not justifying anything that they're saying, but, for someone like Ronnie Jackson, and you mentioned that is the chair of the Defense or Intelligence Committee, for him to be ignorant about, very simple history that, we try to integrate rebel groups in Congo many times for 30 years. Like in 2006, CNDP, the earlier version of M23, they had total amnesty. So the 2006 agreement that the CNDP signed with the Congolese government gave them amnesty. So like no accountability, no prosecution, no justice for any perpetrator of violence. Can you imagine? And then, and that did not prevent them from committing crimes again, from attacking, from doing the same thing in 2009. So what else can we give them? If we've given them amnesty, like what else would we give them? And the congressman is basically saying that, hey, like these people would not lay their arms and go farm the next day. But we've tried that. We've tried everything. We gave them amnesty. Like we integrated a lot of their members into the Congolese army, but that has not worked. So I think our opinions, our recommendations to Congress need to reflect those historical trends and how we engage with members of Congress. So I would say, it's good to have this on the record. We hope that, they don't come back and then, retract that statement, because, they've done that in the past. So,
Can I jump in real quick on that?
Yes, and as a conclusion, because we're wrapping up. Yes, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I think maybe I'll do that. I think saying that Rwanda supports the M23 again is a misnomer. And I would like to use the example of somebody with nicknames. Basically that's what it is. Rwanda's military and Uganda's military invade the Congo, occupy the Congo, and give themselves a nickname. When they first started in the mid to late 90s, they were the AFDL. I'm not going to go through all the acronyms because I want to keep it simple for the audience. And I know you were mentioning the CNDP. Okay, so think of it as Kanye West, right? He has a nickname, yeah. He's Yeezy, he's Jesus, he's Pablo, he's Louis Vuitton Don. And so that is what basically it is. When it comes to this, M23 is just a nickname for Rwanda's and Uganda's forces occupying the Congo, invading and occupying the Congo. So they admitted that they coordinate. They're not just, supporting, they coordinate. They are in lockstep doing this work. And we know this. And among the many admissions actually that we've had of Rwanda invading the Congo is a speech on April 13th, 2010, 6 months before the mapping report came out. So back to your point about them denying things that they've already admitted. Paul Kagame in Congress, he was swearing in 3 of his biggest butchers in Rwanda's parliament or Congress. James Kabarebe, General Charles Kayonga, who's also been known to destabilize the Congo and being part of the coordinators of the M23. And then there was a third one that I can't remember. I don't think it was Jack Nziza, who also has been named many times in these atrocities in the Congo. Paul Kagame said, these are, and I'm going to quote him and translate. We went to Congo. We killed those, we shot those we wanted to shoot, and we repatriated the ones we wanted to repatriate. He's admitted to doing these type of things. And, they've made these admissions many times. And, let me just say it in Kinyarwanda too, so that people don't think that I'm just making this up. He said, twagiye muri Congo, abo twashakaga kurasa twarabarashe, abo twashakaga gutahana twarabatahanye. Basically the same thing that I just said. Now, Paul Kagame, then 6 months later, the mapping report, the UN exercise mapping report, which should be, and that's really my concluding point, is Congo has to have justice. There has to be accountability in order for there to be lasting peace. And that mapping report actually gives the framework for a foundation and a base to build a project with milestones and timelines and actually accountability built into it. When the mapping report came out, they denied that they weren't in the Congo. They never went to the Congo. They never committed genocide in the Congo. He was bragging about it 6 months before. So they may come back and retract that statement. And there is a whole generation of people. There's a whole generation of people who, especially in Western academia and also in a variety of positions, who are committed to the narrative that Paul Kagame has fed, including in the media, because they do not want to correct themselves. They don't want to correct what they put out about the Rwandan genocide, about what's happened in the Congo. In fact, they would rather not even talk about or address what is happening in the Congo, because it's an inconvenient truth. But again, we must push for justice and accountability. That is what's going to bring lasting peace. All of these deals that they're talking about, regional integration, there used to be something called, I think it's still there, but not functional, called CPGL, that connected Rwanda, Burundi, and Congo. It was a community already voluntary. And other countries also in the region can plug in. You know, that's not an issue with neighbors cooperating. But that's not going to happen because Rwanda sends their troops, kill, genocide, rape, amputate women's genitals, and displaces people, takes over territory, calls it their own. That is not the way that it's going to happen. And until there is actually justice and accountability, it's going to be a long way before peace is achieved in the Congo. But that's what we must push for. And on our way there, we got to, pick up these little milestones. We got to keep, picking up these wins. And the first win is going to be making sure that the narrative about what is really happening in the Congo is mainstream, becomes like what everybody knows about it. And everybody that's a gatekeeper, everybody that's controlled opposition, everybody that's playing lip service is unable to continue doing that.
Yeah, thank you, Claus. Niels?
Trying to unmute. For concluding remarks, I think Claude laid it out perfectly. We really need to track all the versions, the different versions of the fact that Paul Kagame has presented on an international stage, and now we have this statement on the record, and we have the fact on the ground that contradict his statement, and so we really need to use them. I'll also say here in closing that it's very important for the Congolese diaspora, the Congolese community, to show up at those hearings, especially those who are in or around the DC area. So those are discussions that are open to the public, so we need to take advantage. Most of the discussions about Congo are not open to the public. We actually learned on Thursday that there was a briefing from senior advisor Bulos that was not public, but if there is anything public, we really need to show up. We need to make sure that we are part of those discussions. But thank you again, Gaetan. This was a very insightful discussion, and always good to learn from you, Claude.
Yes, and thank you so much to the two of you. This has been really great. Claude, Niels, thank you so much, and I'm sure y'all will be back, and we're gonna be talking about more on the Congo and Rwanda, on immigration, and continue to raise global consciousness on the issues of the Congo. So thank you so much, guys.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Good seeing y'all, brothers.
Yeah.
So what show 2 hours, and essentially we ran down to 3 points that the Congolese lawyers and I talked about at the beginning of saying that the Washington Accord violates the Congolese Constitution. US lawmakers are saying that peace requires compromise from the Congo. And the Rwandan government has now admitted, and I know there was a nuance that we talked about, they have in a different iteration of the M23 with the CNDP, the RCD, the AFDL, and we talked about this. But on records now, like Brother Neil said, they have admitted facts that were previously being dismissed as allegations, and then they called us conspiracy theorists. They called us that we hated Rwanda by always saying that there are somehow manufacturing or they are behind the invasion, the killing. And all this time it was fact. So these three realities cannot coexist without contradictions, and that's my humble opinion. So today we are not asking whether Congo wants peace. We are really truly asking what kind of peace Congolese people want, what Congolese people need, what kind of peace is it? And on whose term? Are the Congolese people finally be given justice and accountability? And my guest, Brother Niels, immigration attorney and activist within Congo's diaspora desk, and Claude Gatibuke, who's an activist, human rights activist, Rwandan citizen, and also co-author of the book Uncensored, that relate or talks about the story of victim of genocide. And we have the opportunity, you had the opportunity to hear from those two people to talk about the challenge of the Congo, deepen this conversation, and help us understand the perspective, the global, the geopolitics at play, and how the people of the Congo are once again being ignored. So now that you have that knowledge, what are you going to do about it? Brother Neil said that you need to go and talk to your congressman or woman. Ask them to provide you with an understanding of why things are being done the way they're being done, and why American tax dollars, why your tax dollars are being spent on killing and displacing civilians overseas. That's a responsibility that you have. So this was Congo Unfiltered. I appreciate y'all being tuned. Please give us a follow on our different social media pages, Instagram, follow us, YouTube. Please subscribe, give us a thumbs up if you liked it. Share these videos, this live, our tweets, our posts, so that together we can continue to raise global consciousness that what's going on in the Congo is a humanitarian issue. It's a human rights issue. And it will take all of us to dismantle the lies and the narrative that has essentially dehumanized the Congolese people. The system that has also impoverished US citizens here, because instead of using the money, $150 million, the brother Claude said, when that money could have been invested here in the US. So thank you so much for this Saturday, for this time, and I will catch you later next week with another episode. Peace.